as we head into free agency and the draft, who are the absolute bona fide untouchables on the Arizona Cardinals roster? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Cardinals, Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is going to be a really fun string of shows. It's always fun. Always love, hacking it with everydayers, and hacking probably makes me look worse than I am. Yucking it up. How about that? That's professional. But this series coming up after today, it's going to be a series called Fix the Cardinals. And what it's going to do is it's going to go position group by position group, how the Cardinals are doing things right, what needs to be fixed, and how to fix it. I'm going to start with the team as a whole tomorrow, then go to quarterback, and on down the list. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be fascinating. I'm really excited for it. So hopefully you tune into that today. This is something I'm almost more excited about because this is something where it really puts into perspective who is, as a player, not as a human being, as an employee, is potentially disposable in an effort to make this roster better in 2025 than it was in 2024. And I've got two segments: one, on the field untouchables; two, leadership / on the field untouchables in the second segment; and the home run moves only, otherwise untouchable. And yes, Marvin Harrison Jr. is in the third segment. He's an honorable mention for the first, split between the first and the third segment. And I'll explain, okay? I just want to put into perspective how there are so many different ways to make this roster better. That's what this is for. I call them exercises. You can call them, brain Olympics, whatever you want to call them. But this is how I see this roster currently. And I implore people going into this show, don't get married or have a love affair with a player when the real goal here is to make this roster better. So, jumping into it, the player untouchables, Kyler Murray, okay? This is for this year. I know the report's out, not a report. It was a writer based in New Jersey or around the Jets area where it's, the Jets should trade for Kyler Murray. You're going to see some of that this offseason. And if you tell me they offer 2 first-rounders and Sauce Gardner for Kyler Murray, you can start the conversation. I'm not saying it should happen. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm not saying it benefits the Cardinals for it to happen. But it's a fool's errand to not pick up a phone call when that is the starting point for a potential trade package for your quarterback. It's a fool's errand not to have the conversation. But with that, Kyler Murray's untouchable. Okay. Barring any sort of ridiculous monstrosity of an offer, multiple picks, multiple players, or whatever it is, untouchable. And I'm going to go into how the Cardinals fixed the quarterback position on Thursday. And it's going to be fascinating. But Kyler Murray, by all accounts, untouchable. Trey McBride, untouchable. This one's pretty obvious. This is going to be an easy show for me for the first 2 segments, and it's going to be a real B in the third segment. Trey McBride, while now Brock Bowers is the apple of everybody's eye, and that's fine. Just like Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride at the time was not drafted to save the offense. He shouldn't have been drafted by the Cardinals anyways, let's be honest. It was idiocy by Steve Keim to take a tight end in the second round a couple years ago, but it's worked out incredibly well for the Cardinals. I think it was just dumb luck. It was just dumb luck that he ended up on the Cardinals. but he's been an absolute vision. And you started to see this is the natural progression of a young tight end who had a George Kittle comp coming out of college. He had one good year, one not so great year. He's a blocking tight end. He's a wide receiver. When he goes out on passing routes, he's been an absolute vision. And I don't see for the next 7 or 8 years why he wouldn't be doing exactly this. So you thank Steve Keim for his last gift to the Arizona Cardinals. Obvious, no doubt about it. Untouchable will get a massive extension and well-deserved. Okay. Paris Johnson Jr., untouchable. And naturally, during this conversation, well, obviously, you're not trading a third. Who would offer to trade for a third-year left tackle? This is an exercise. Players that are above any sort of move inside the box, outside the box that the Cardinals could make or could accept if other teams were to offer packages for said player. Paris Johnson Jr., untouchable. Left tackle for the future, hopefully for the next 10 years. He is going to be a pillar for this team, a guy who's a set and forget guy, hopefully with all pro and perennial Pro Bowl in his future. Set and forget, no doubt about it. Okay? Garrett Williams, untouchable. Garrett Williams is a bona fide CB1. I know he plays inside. Okay? That doesn't matter. Garrett Williams is a guy who opposing defenses will have to scheme around. And that is something the Arizona Cardinals haven't had a whole bunch of. Like, since Patrick Peterson was at his peak over a decade ago, or whatever it is at this point. You don't really have to scheme around Budda Baker because all Budda Baker has done is, filled holes, filled voids with, that's devoid of talent, especially in the CB room, pretty much for the entirety of his career. So they haven't really had Chandler Jones like around 2020 and 2021. Maybe you had to scheme around. Sure. But the Cardinals haven't had a bona fide cornerback that opposing offenses had to scheme around since Patrick Peterson a decade ago. Let that sink in. 10 years. Garrett Williams, untouchable. So, in overview, you got a quarterback, you got a tight end, you got a left tackle, you got a CB1. Four of the five most important entities in football, you've got those locked in. Okay? And this is from a pure play perspective. And I think that when you look at it that way, it's like, oh, the Cardinals, they check the boxes on very important positions that many other teams don't have two of or three of, let alone all four. And I'm utilizing Kyler Murray in this sense because I'm still a firm believer he's better than 70% of the quarterbacks in the NFL. I implore you, once again, I use the word implore. Because beg sounds weaker. I implore you to go look at a list of quarterbacks that started last year. It's brutal out there. Aside from the top, 5 or 7, 8. It's brutal out there. So when you look at these four guys, it's like, you know what? The Cardinals have a very solid and young, Kyler Murray's still young, solid and very young foundation in very, very important spots. Now, leadership/play untouchables. This goes to two people with, an honorable mention just to throw in because of how he played last year. But really, two. Absolute bona fide. If you've listened to the show for the last couple of years, you may know who these two are because I've grouped them together for pretty much the last 2 off seasons and 2 full seasons. When people said that they should move on from both of them, I've been in the camp that they should retain them until they retire. And, well, lo and behold, I was right for once. It's crazy. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether it's backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So while this roster is incomplete still, while this roster doesn't have as far to go as kind of expected going into 2024, there's still, as I say a bunch on the show, that 0-1 jump that really heightens the floor talent-wise to make them perpetually relevant. The Untouchables are what's holding things afloat for now. You get injured guys coming back, get a whole round of free agency, a whole round of draft picks again, where the Cardinals will be ready to rock come 2025 week 1. The player Untouchables, like play on the field, Kyler Murray, Trey McBride, Paris Johnson Jr., Garrett Williams. Yeah, Yalta Froholt, sure. Michael Wilson, sure. Mac Wilson, Buda, Dadrian Taylor. When push comes to shove, there's only 4 guys on the field that are untouchable, in my opinion. Now, we're grouping these 2 in as well, Buda Baker and James Conner. Okay, so that's 6. Absolutely bona fide untouchable. And there's nuance to these 2. So sure, you've got the leadership. You got the veteran angle here. Locker room, on the field. These have been the 2 leaders on and off the field, for the last couple seasons for this team. And the importance of these guys to this roster, I think, is pretty obvious at this point. I don't know why others didn't see it. I don't know why others were, they drafted Dadrian Taylor Deverson, who doesn't play Buda Baker's position. They drafted Trey Benson. Let's just move off these guys because that's what history told you to do. No, think for yourself. Both of these guys add immense value still. And the beautiful part about it, while Buda Baker is now the 3rd highest paid safety in the league as he's approaching 30, they're not requiring top flight money. James Conner never did. James Conner, I think, was underpaid for the last 2 contracts. And part of it was because of injury. And the invaluable nature of what Buda Baker can do with a roster that has actual talent, we saw on display last year. So the untouchable version of it is they're not top flight 1%ers at their position. So that adds intrinsic and inherent value for the Cardinals because, first of all, you don't have to pay them like it. And secondarily, they're not required to save anything. They're required to be a cog and a trustworthy and leader cog of both sides of the ball. That's what their role is. James Conner's role moving forward, you'd hope, isn't to be the metronome of the offense anymore. I'm going to fix the Cardinals running backs. It's going to be a part of that. I'll probably do that on Friday. I don't know. I still need to map it out. But the leadership untouchables, just to put, a label on it that's not just play on the field, but play on the field obviously comes into play here. Neither of them would have got contract extensions if it wasn't warranted. These 2 guys represent what the Arizona Cardinals 2.0 is. And I know they were part of the last regime. I know they were part of kind of the mud and the muck. Buda Baker definitely was. James Conner came over a bit after. He became the focal point of the offense, which, is a fallacy in and of itself when it's supposed to be a pass-first offense. But these 2 guys add so much value. They add so much, they're the perfect lead by example and lead on the field guys and vocal guys. Lead by example and they're vocal. They're as consistent and level-headed as you want your leaders to be. I could gush about that. I could do weeks of shows on them and how important they are to this team. So while there is a very outside chance, they'll trade for James Conner as an exercise, I don't see a world where Budda Baker or James Conner should be wearing any other uniform besides an Arizona Cardinal uniform. Period. Budda Baker, I still have a feeling, and I've said this a handful of times, Budda Baker's last 2 years, something like that, when, he's kind of moved into that, next iteration of his career where he's not at his peak anymore. I see him going to Seattle. I just always had that thought that he'd go play in Seattle. He went to UW. I just have a feeling about that. But the fact that he's not a Baltimore Raven right now, or he's not a Kansas City Chief right now, the fact that he re-signed, he would have got this money elsewhere. This isn't we're going to give Larry Fitzgerald $11 million for 1 year where he'd get $3.5 million elsewhere for 4 years in a row. That's not this. He was paid market value, and he wanted to stay here. James Conner, same thing. Quoted saying multiple times, I like being here. I want to be in Arizona Cardinals. I love it here. And you know what? That's a far cry from Chase Edmonds. That's a far cry from many, Patrick Peterson, who cares? That's a far cry from many, past Cardinals players who had an actual strong reasoning as to why they didn't want to be a part of this organization anymore. That's a shift. It's by action. It's by words. It's by past players saying one thing, current players re-signing for the same money they could have got elsewhere because they enjoy it here now. Budda Baker's been through the entire gambit. He was here for 2018. And the defense didn't play poorly in 2018. They had a pretty good defense in 2018. The offense was like a farm CFL team. Budda Baker, James Conner, untouchable. That's 6. Out of the entire roster, that's 6. Home run moves only. I'm not doing this to troll. I'm not doing this to double down on my conversation about how the Cardinals should be open to moving Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think they should. The only caveat needs one final segment because this is the Untouchables episode, and I'll do it next. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. So please go to the YouTube channel, search Locked On Arizona Cardinals, leave a like on the video, subscribe, please. It helps the algorithm for me to spread the love of Locked On Cardinals. At Clancy's Corner on Twitter. The reason why Marvin Harrison Jr. wasn't in the Untouchables in the first segment is because he yields the most trade value without seeing the production. Had a great rookie year. Okay, people say, he didn't have Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas Jr. Look at the offenses that they were on. I've said this already today. He wasn't drafted to save the offense. He was drafted to be a part of the offense, which is the best case scenario for any young receiver, especially one with such a high ceiling coming out of college and out of the draft is Marvin Harrison Jr. Okay, this isn't they need to trade. That's ridiculous. That's ludicrous. And if they want to swing for the fences and they get an offer that is non-refusable, but it includes Marvin Harrison Jr., I think that's a conversation you need to have. I think it's a conversation you need to have. If this were Cliff Kingsbury's offense and you were hucking it down the field, no shot. In Drew Petzing's offense, that's worked better than any offense the Cardinals have had. Since Bruce Arians, Cliff had his moments. Okay, yes, of course. I'm not saying he was a terrible offensive coordinator for every second that he was here. What I've stated, and Jason Frozen Smoke, you'll get your shout out here. Cliff Kingsbury put together a great movie trailer, but most of the time the movie wasn't very good. And that was the entirety of his tenure here. Drew Petzing has put together an offense that's a big boy offense in the NFL. And what is that predicated upon? Running the ball, play action, tight end. And sure, the tight end was featured a lot more 2 years ago because he didn't have a bona fide wide receiver one. Okay, I understand all of that. Hollywood Brown was out. Michael Wilson was hurt for a chunk, and he was a rookie. They never got Greg Dortch involved. Trey McBride was the guy, with especially with Josh Dobbs, and then the run game was on display. So while, like the majority of you, I would assume, want to see Marvin Harrison Jr. and 18 thrive and be put up in the Ring of Honor and be an All-Pro and Pro Bowler and all that stuff, I'm with you. But if they get offered a package instead of 2 future firsts, a first in Marvin Harrison Jr. for a top flight pass rusher, a top flight interior defensive lineman, a top, obviously the positions are going to be minimal for what the offer would be for. It needs to be a conversation, in my opinion. The future doesn't matter for the Cardinals. Now matters. And that's an uncomfortable truth, but that's where we are. Watching this team, covering this team, talking about this team that I have every day for the last 9 or 8 years, 9 years, whatever it is. The future is always more fun because it's never real. Now is real. Now is what matters, not what could happen in the future. So that's why, in a home run move only caveat to being an untouchable, Marvin Harrison Jr. gets his own segment. Now, again, should they trade Marvin Harrison Jr.? No. Would it be a good idea to shop Marvin Harrison Jr.? Of course not. And also, the future doesn't matter for this team. Now matters. And if now you can get exponentially better with proven talent for years at a key position of need, and that's going to cost you what could be in the future, it's a conversation that absolutely needs to happen. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Remember, without you, there is no me. Fixing the Cardinals series starts tomorrow with the team as a whole. I'll talk to you then.